Hi, this is Rabbi Rami Goldberg, and welcome to another episode of Biblical Money. Today, I am joined by a crypto king, someone who has been involved in crypto, Bitcoin from pretty early on, Moeti Ncube, down in Florida. Thank you very much, Moeti, for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So, Moeti, crypto, everybody's like, oh, I should have bought it when. And it seems like you did get involved earlier on. How did you know that this was going to be a thing and that made you kind of jump on this train earlier than most people even knew there was such a thing?
So I think my story in Bitcoin goes back to 2011 there was a Gawker article that came out that talked about, Bitcoin being used on the dark web. And that's what it was, like a sensational article. And I started to do some research and I found the white paper. And what appealed to me was in the first sentence, it said a peer-to-peer version of electronic cash. And I grew up in that era in the 90s where, you had like the Napsters and all these peer-to-peer technologies that were arising. And I never heard that term, connected to money before. So that was the first appeal. So I got in quite early. I always say I think I bought my first Bitcoin at $2.50. I did not hold, but I learned a lot through the process of.
Well, you'd be an island somewhere if you held,
absolutely,
right?
yeah. I would be definitely. I might own an island or two, but it was there's still no regrets because what's interesting about the process of, even though I did not necessarily make the optimal decisions from a financial perspective, buying a bunch and just holding, I think that the process of being within this whole, to see like this seed movement become like this global phenomenon, in many ways, it allowed me to become a historian of sorts that I never even imagined myself becoming. And I find the value of being able to have a unique experience on this earth that I can genuinely say, hey, I can tell a story that not many people can tell. I value that. And, even if I didn't necessarily have the billions, but I think I have a $1 billion story.
Right. No, it's for sure. Storytelling, ultimately, God is the ultimate storyteller, right? So that's to have a story to tell and something to share is certainly something that you want. So you get involved, you start looking around, you're like, wait a sec, this is really cool, and then you hear about people who bought a $100,000 pizza because they bought it way back then. So you were kind of in that, well, what's going to be, and so you sell and you get back in. Bitcoin's a tough market. You're going up and you're going down. Like I'm saying, I think that's the booms and busts of it. I think are one of the most challenging areas.
Absolutely, and one thing that's important to understand about the early days is that in the early days it was actually more of an idealism than people speculating initially. So a lot of the early buyers were. I think one of the connections that it has to, like, the Bible, is that it was almost like an exodus. There was this desire for, people were frustrated with the current monetary system. They didn't understand it, and then here comes this structure. They're like, hey, here's a sound money system. We can tell you exactly how much is out there, and it was almost like, hey, like, let's imagine this exodus into this new economy, and let's buy into it. And it wasn't until later on that the speculative part kind of evolved. But again, I think people, the process of these booms and bust cycles, it almost became this running joke, because in the early days, you would see people, go to $100 and go down to $2, and it would go up again, and then people got used to these massive volatile swings, where it became something where initially people would become fearful, to it almost became like this fun thing. Well, this is just this is just Bitcoin.
Right. It's what's the next day, and it's interesting, and I'm just kind of thinking about this now, but to a certain extent, when we think about our lives and we think about what could be, what tomorrow is going to bring, sometimes we really crave that certainty as people. But ultimately, within God's world, there's a lot of uncertainty that's out there. I mean, all of a sudden, I mean, we're sitting here in the middle of a war in Israel, and it's been going on for a year and a half. And 2 days before, I was literally down on the Gaza border, and it's like, who would have thought 2 days later we're going to be faced with this crazy situation, And so it's like we kind of, I think there's a certain amount of that, like maybe being comfortable with that uncertainty that's like important.
Absolutely.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great way to look at it. Is that because ultimately, like you'll hear the analysts saying, "Oh, what's the price of Bitcoin going to be a year from now? It'll be $1 million, it'll be $2." And the fact of the matter is, no one knows. There's no way. It doesn't matter how smart somebody thinks they are, whatever. Like there is no way to predict with 100% certainty what the price of Bitcoin is going to be. So there is massive uncertainty. All we know is the history. We know that this thing was worth nothing, and it skyrocketed over $100,000, and it's been through these cycles. And we know that there is a scarcity component to it. And I would say one of the best arguments I've heard is that that if every millionaire in the world wanted a Bitcoin, I think there's 60 million millionaires. So if every millionaire wanted a Bitcoin, there is not enough. And so the idea is that, okay, well, that scarcity component, if it continues to become a brand, and there really is a value, and people really pursue it, not every millionaire can have some. So the idea is that it's, like the $1 million valuation is not unreasonable from that perspective, but that's all speculative. And so, we have to learn how to be okay operating, and really it's like a faith-based asset. Like I have an asset, like I have this hope of what it could be, but there's not enough evidence for me to say it with certainty, but I could still operate to now as that's what is going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times they call them Bitcoin evangelists or crypto evangelists, right?
Yes.
That there is a lot of that. I think you even mentioned, right, when it came out, that was the same day as Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation.
Yes. So I think that's an interesting parallel where the Bitcoin white paper, which is the paper that kind of spearheaded this entire movement, it was just released anonymously on the internet on October 31st, 2008. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think when you look at, with the Reformation, trying to, it was a challenge about like, institutional power. And then the paper talks about the same thing. And, you see a lot of parallels.
Right. And so that's, and it's kind of like the way that God created the world, added this, like, what in Hebrew is called yesh me'ayin, right? Something from nothing, right? That's when God creates the world, it's just, and there was light. Beforehand, there's nothing, and now there's something that can store value. I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of, they don't really understand how it works. So if in like 1 to 2 minutes, can you give us just like a sense of like, what is it? And why is it different than gold or money? You have money, you're going to take my money. You're happy to take my Bitcoin. Like, what is it? And how, like, in 1 to 2 minutes, give us a layman's definition.
Okay, all right, I'll try my best. But I would say that Bitcoin is, at first you have to look at it as a mathematical formula. It's actually a mathematical solution to a particular problem. And I would say even more simpler than that, it's a ledger. Everybody understands that you can have an accounting ledger that, you can store, hey, like, Adam has 5 apples, Eve has 10 apples, and you can just, put a bunch of people's names and then record how much of something that they actually own, whatever that may be. What Bitcoin did is that it just created a ledger, and it created a protocol for who gets to write who owns what on the ledger. And that was the complicated part, is that, okay, we have methods for doing that, but what if we don't want any one particular person to control the whether or not somebody gets to write in the ledger or not? We want it to be like this open source process. And that's where the math comes in, where so you have this ledger and there are very few rules. One of the rules that everybody knows, that, okay, there can only be 21 million units that could be on this ledger. And we can assign particular values to particular entries on the ledger. And there's a process for doing that. So the value really comes from people desiring the right to be able to write on this ledger and to be able to say that they own a particular stake in that ledger. And that is something. Now, what the value of that is actually just determined by the market and how many people desire to have access to this ledger.
Wow, it's wild. Literally, is just you and I writing down on a piece of paper that you own this and I own that, and we have some mathematical calculation to say that we're in agreement on who owns what.
Exactly. It's a new consensus protocol. And I think another way to look at it is that it kind of, one of the big challenges is like, how do we determine what actually happened in the past? And what the Bitcoin protocol did is it came up with a way for us to determine how to come to consensus. So let's say if we disagreed on what the ledger should be, it created a contest so that we can compete against each other, and whoever wins determines what the past really is. And it does it in a way that incentivizes me to actually tell the truth. So it's kind of it's a lot of ideas in one, but ultimately it really is just a ledger, and that anybody can participate in trying to say what happened, but as long as you abide by certain rules.
Right. Wow. So that's it's crazy just to think about it. As far as that ledger. So you mentioned to me that again that going down, besides it being kind of this game, but there were some lessons that you really felt like you learned from that boom and bust cycle. As far as connected to faith. You want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like that from being in the space, I kind of, there were like three periods I was in Bitcoin, where I was in 2011. I kind of got out in 2013. I came back in 2017. I played around, and I made money in some areas, and then some areas I didn't make as much money as I thought I should have made. And so I think what Bitcoin has done is given me insight into some of the emotions of greed and fear that you hear people talk about, but it's another thing when you personally experience it. So, like, I would hear people say, okay, man, if I buy something, if it goes to $500,000, I'm going to sell and I'm going to be happy. And, but then once something gets to a certain price, then you're like, well, if I just wait maybe another week and it doubles, then I can have $1 million. And so there's this greed component where people, they say they're going to do something, and then when they have more money than they ever had before, all of a sudden they're like, well, maybe if I wait a little bit longer, I can get more money. And then it doesn't, all of a sudden you lose everything. Then all you do is sit back like, man, I should have listened to what I said. So I think that part of one thing it taught me is that if you're going to get involved in something, you have to be able to have your predefined rules. Like, okay, if you're going to buy something, at what point are you going to sell, or are you going to sell? So you might say, I'm just going to buy, and this is just it. I'm going to pass it on as a legacy item to my children. Or you could say, I'm going to buy, and if the price triples, I'm going to sell no matter what. And all of these things are, no one knows the future, but you have to be able to have principles on how you operate in order for you to have peace with, how, or you're always going to be looking back and like, what I should have done. I think one of the worst things you can do in the space is be emotional. and not have any clear rules as to what you would do. In crypto in general, one thing that, and I don't really recommend crypto stocks to people anymore. I've done that in the past, and they're in. I've been to some people have made money off of that, but I think one thing I realize is that um, because I can't control your emotions, I don't want to be responsible for that. Because what I would tell people is that if you're going to buy something speculative, my advice is to triple your money and take out your initial investment and let the rest ride, right? But the problem is that you have to have people who listen to that advice, and not everybody does. And so if they triple their money, then what do? Let me put more money into it, right? And then it goes a bit more. They put more money into it. Then all of a sudden it goes down. Now they actually lost everything that they would have initially put in, and and you feel guilty for that because you're like, man, I would have rather you not have gotten into this space if I knew that you were going to just operate from that realm. So like I said, those are all lessons that I learned. And obviously you deal with people where there's a lot of money that's going back and forth, and you meet people, you're doing transactions, and you learn how like that some people can be trusted with money and some people can. So there's a lot of trust that you learn from dealing with different people in this space. And yeah, it's a just existing in the space. It's almost like you're getting a degree in crypto finance. That's it comes with the territory.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're getting a degree actually in psychology, more so than more so than crypto. But I mean, you mentioned as far as greed. I mean, the rabbis have a line which I think also is similar that you find it in Proverbs. But someone who someone who has 100 wants 200, meaning that there's always going to be this, and once you get to that 200, it's just going to always be more and more. And unlike other kind of lusts that we have, whether it be for money or for food, for food or for intimate relations or all those types of things, there is like a limit. Meaning your stomach is only so big as far as how much a person can eat. At a certain point, you're going to vomit. But when it comes to money, it's just another zero in the ledger, and okay, why not go for that bigger number? So I think that greed component is like, okay, what are my principles here, and what are my rules that I'm going to stick to? And I think that's probably one of the big the big challenges that one faces in any economic environment, but particularly when there's this boom and bust situation.
Absolutely, yeah. Having a code that you stick by, regardless of what happens in the future, and that's so interesting when it comes to morality too, because we're on this planet, and we believe as believers that like God has given us a code to live by, while we're on the planet, regardless, right?
With regard to greed, when a person does have these wanting to get up there, and what should a person do with regard
Oh
to
yeah, yeah,
the
with the code. Okay, yeah. So it's basically similar to how God has given us a code to live by on this planet, regardless of what happens in the future. There's certain principles and codes that we're supposed to live by. The same thing was money. That there are certain codes that, like, hey, like when do you buy? When do you sell? What are you going to do? If these things happen, you can define these things before you even buy Bitcoin. And what happens is that when you don't do that, you end up just being led by your emotions. And I think it's the same thing that happens, where when people don't have a code that they live by in life, well, when chaos occurs, you just revert back to your emotions. And so I think that you can learn a lot of you can kind of learn the reasoning behind a lot of biblical principles from being in this space, and you see the consequences in real time. Like you can see the people who trade or buy Bitcoin and they don't have any strategy at all, And you can see what it doesn't matter if they make $1 million, $2 million. It always ends up blowing up in their face. They're like, oh, I did it. Well, you didn't really have a plan. And versus the people who like, hey, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna buy, like, there was a guy, I think he just bought $100 every single week or something, like since like 2017, and accumulated millions of dollars because he just said, I'm just gonna do this one thing every single week consistently, regardless of whether or not it goes up or down. And that strategy ended up being outperforming every other thing he could have done. And this is something that we all went back 10 years ago. We all could have just put $100 every single Friday on our checks and retired, off of that from just being consistent with something. And it's not necessarily the most flashy thing, but a lot of times, it makes you realize that, hey, it's the things that people overlook because it doesn't get the attention that ultimately ends up being the most valuable in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you see. I mean, I'm a big hockey fan, right? And just yesterday, Alexander Ovechkin beat Gretzky's record of most goals, and you could say, oh my gosh, it's the most amazing thing. I want that one goal, which is gonna set the record. But no, it's just that consistency over time, just doing every single day, showing up and doing a little bit at a time, and yeah. Let the compounding interest, let the markets do their thing. I think some of the challenges now is people are like, oh, it's at $80,000, $90,000, whatever it's at. Well, if I put in $100 every week from now for the next 10 years, will I be able to capitalize on that same return? I think that's where everyone's like, oh no, maybe I should find the next thing.
Yes, but the funny thing about that, I heard that same line of reasoning when the price was $100, when the price was $1,000, when the price was $10,000. So it's like every cycle is it's too. There's no way it can get higher than that. Let me see if I can find the new thing, which again goes back to a biblical principle. Like, think about how many people have like, oh, we need a new Bible, we need this. Well, then they realize you can just go back to the original thing and just focus. It's not too late. And I think it's similar, like, to what happens where, and eventually, it took me a while to even realize too, because I definitely hopped around a different coin. Like, oh, maybe I can get something cheaper here. And I'm like, you know what? I could have just, I could have just continued the exact same thing and, just focus on my rules and not worry about what else is going on, and then let's see what happens in 5 years. And that ultimately ends up, from all the history we have, it doesn't matter what period you go to, that has always ended up being the best strategy. So, if it, why not continue? Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I mean that's they say that there's an old Chinese proverb: when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago.
Exactly.
And the next best time is today, and that's it. And just to jump in and to recognize that, okay, we are where we are right now, and now we need to go ahead and we need to just be in the place that God has put us right here, right now, having this conversation, and okay, get in the game and start with something that's small and not necessarily swing for the fences. You're trying to get that base hit day in, day out.
Absolutely. I actually discourage people from trying to swing for the fences. Like, this is not a space where you want to. If anything, like, allow this space to teach you something about discipline. Where if you want to get into the space and you have $50 to spare, then that's okay. You can start with that $50 and just say, I'm gonna do $50 every single week. And no matter what happens in 5 years, you have taught yourself a new discipline. And I think that is something that, if we focus more on that than the speculative, oh, you can have all these riches and this, that, and the third, I think that people will get more out of the space.
As far as when it comes to these ideas of greed and making sure that there's the kind of this boom and bust cycle, right, that you're in, and I think we need to have that discipline kind of moving forward with regard to with regard to all aspects of life. And this is just, another one. And maybe it's more emotionally tied than some of the others.
Absolutely. Yeah, but money reveals a lot about who we are because I think we assign so much value to us having ownership of money that I think that it does reflect so much of our principles. So it is a great way to exercise what we say we truly believe.
So God has blessed you with at least to see, certain aspects, even if you didn't get the full wave. What are some of the things that you like to give back to within society? What are some of the things that you're passionate about as far as charity or church?
Absolutely. So one way that I have decided to give back in this space was, I co-founded a company called CryptoTutors, where me and my co-founders, Nina and Lisa, we basically decided that we wanted to make sure that we wanted to create an educational platform to one elevate the stories of. There are so many people in this space that are not on the main stage at the Bitcoin conventions, and so we spend a lot of time, even on our YouTube channel, of giving people platforms in different countries on how they contributed to the space, and we put a book together to kind of pass out to young kids to show them the diversity in this space. There are men, women, black, white, all over the place, and there are people that look like them that are in this space to make them feel connected to it. We also we were on Shark Tank. I think this is right during the pandemic. Because of we've had our software that we had developed, and we've actually done consulting with Microsoft and Cash App, a lot of companies like that. And so there was a lot of interest in partnering with us. I think Mr. Wonderful, I know that he put a bid in with our company. So yeah, we definitely have an imprint.
We'll definitely link to that episode on this.
Yeah, well, I think we have a screenshot. I don't think they aired the episode, but we do have a. They sent us like a screenshot. During the when they advertise the next season, you kind of see like us there, but they never actually aired the episodes. I don't know. Maybe one day they'll give us the episode, but it is part of history.
Yeah. So you have this company that you're helping as far as educating more about Bitcoin, and then charity wise, what are some of the things that you're passionate as far as charity?
Well, what's interesting is that in the early days of Bitcoin, I took a trip to Zimbabwe with my father. That's where my father's from, and I got a chance to talk to some of the young kids at the school that he attended, and I remember that I had back then Bitcoin's not worth that much, and I gave all the kids who had like their phones, I gave them zero point 0.1 Bitcoin each. And I told him to hold on to this, right? And it was funny. I think several years later, one of the kids reached out to me like, "Hey, remember that zero point 0.1 Bitcoin that you gave me? I don't think I lost it. I think that was worth like $5,000 or $6,000, right?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have it. I sent it to you, so I don't know. Like, you have to make sure you keep your password." So I've done that throughout pretty much through my entire time in the Bitcoin space. Is that I've always given, small amounts here and there, like if I'm educating. That's the funny thing. I think I did this reverse education thing. Let's say there's like a young kid that comes to me and they ask a genuine question, then I will give them a little something just for them to indulge my advice. And so it could be like $20, $50, or maybe a little bit of crypto, because I want them to know that, hey, education is valuable, and let me just show you a little something for that. So, and like I said, I like investing, even my local community. I'm really big on. Sometimes I'll see kids like at the gas station, and they're wiping windows to try to raise some money. And I'll ask them like, "Hey, what are you really trying to do?" Because sometimes they only need "Hey, if I could get me a lawnmower, then I can start my own business." And I remember being that age where I was trying to start a business. I think I think one of this newsletter business. I remember I needed $600 to print all these papers, and I spent like months developing this business. I didn't have the money, and no one was going to give me the money, right? And so to this day, I still have a passion for these young kids where, sometimes all they need is $300. I mean, for me, I need a lot more money to start a business, but for them, it's like, they're like $300 or $400, and that could be all they need because they're just using labor at their level. And, so I like being able to just, hey, here goes $300. I don't need equity in your company. Just start your company, right? And I like doing things like that. And yeah, so education obviously is I do a chess club in our community for, like, the kids like between 7 and 11, because my oldest daughter's that age too. I wanted to teach her chess, and I wanted to open it up for the community. So just things like that.
Wow. That's amazing. It's amazing. It's just amazing that you got in. It's amazing in terms of giving back and finding those areas where you're able to help kids and again, and we don't always think about it. For a couple of bucks, this kid all started a lemonade stand, and it gets them involved in entrepreneurship and that excitement. So anyway, thank you very much, Moeti. I appreciate the time and wish you continued success and much blessing in everything that you've been doing, and it should be just continued success.
Absolutely, and like I said, if anybody wants to look further into what we do, check out CryptoTutors.com. We got the bios of me, and you can always email me there as well, and just learn more about what we do.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good one.